Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to what is promising to be a really exciting subject as we get together to discuss about impact training program for SDG standards. I'm Frank Aswani. I'm the CEO of AVPA. We are super excited to be hosting this program with UNDP. The SDGs remain one of the targets that Africa aims to achieve if we're to move the standards of living of our people on the continent and generally advance the continent to where we'd like it to be from where it is at the moment. From a financing perspective, the continent has an annual gap of about $1.2 trillion between now and 2030. And we know traditionally a lot of the social investments or social issues in Africa have been funded through aid and government funding. But nothing new, nothing strange to people on the call. You're aware that aid to Africa is reducing, and even the aid that is coming to Africa is coming seeking more impact than traditional grant opportunities. And if you look at the government's revenue that would be used to service and fund a lot of our social investments, there's also a huge challenge because of the growing public debt and government debt on the continent. So with that in mind, we can only, from those two sources of revenue, aid and government funding, potentially raise about $600 billion of the $1.2 trillion required, which means that that gap can only be filled by turning to the private sector. And the SDGs were designed very much with the private sector in mind, and corporates in Africa are a major part of the private sector community. And this program aims to see how we can support corporates to embed SDGs into their business strategy. Basically, where we come from as AVPA, profit and purpose are not mutually exclusive. You can do well as you do good. And the SDGs are not those things that people think, or they just require grants and stuff, but they have some investment opportunities that can meet the needs of or the expectations of a lot of our private players. You can invest in the SDGs, not necessarily just fund the SDGs. And hence why you hear us talking a lot about financing of the SDGs. If you've read some reports like the Opportunities 2030 Standard Chartered report, it showcases opportunities of up to $40 trillion within just its three infrastructural SDGs of 6, 7, and 9. So as we think about the role of corporates and private sector in SDG support, we want them to come in here with a mindset that that they're coming in to seek the convergence of profit and purpose and play a more supportive and inclusive role as an African corporate on the continent. And this is, I think, what we like our corporates to think about is what would a good corporate citizen or citizen corporate on the continent looks like. And we hope the SDG standards will create a platform and a uniformity of lens that will enable the corporates to play a very committed and very clearly defined role to be able to measure their progress and contribution to this space, and also to be able to see how they're performing against other corporates in the sector. So I'm looking forward to a really interesting conversation. Super excited that you're all here, and we'll be talking quite a bit in the next couple of minutes. So that's me done for now. Joanne?
Thank you very much, Frank. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon, and welcome to all of you online. My name is Joanne Manda. I am the Senior SDG Investment Advisor. I'm based in Pretoria in the UNDP's Africa Sustainable Finance Hub. And just to add a few words of introduction specifically about this course and the work that we're doing on SDG and impact. COVID really got us all thinking in a lot of ways, and it really showed us a number of things. The first one was everything is interconnected. What began as a health crisis really turned out to be a socioeconomic crisis, a political crisis in many areas as well. It also taught us that while you get a new crisis, climate change remains a threat multiplier. So climate change was still pressing on all governments and all stakeholders within the economy. And it also taught us that government can't do it alone. And this is not news. It's something that was, agreed in a resolution that came out of the Addis Ababa Action Agreement in 2015. But for those of us in the development sphere, these were the lessons that we were taking out of the COVID crisis. And for the private sector, we were seeing an upsurge in private sector players who were interested and began to recognize that sustainability matters, that this interconnectedness is important even from a business perspective. And so we saw an upsurge in ESG investing, impact investing, because as Frank said, it's really important to do well as you do good. And so we started talking about the double or the triple bottom line and really thinking through as the private sector what we're going to do about not just the economic returns, but also making sure that we are safeguarding environmental and social aspects of our businesses. And now as governments are facing recovery from COVID, we are recognizing additional things, including the fact that our financial systems are moving us in a direction that is unsustainable. The way we have always been doing business really needs to change. And financial flows, capital flows need to really align with the SDGs if we're going to actually have sustainability and to sustain the levels of development that we have already and reach new levels of development that we are still aspiring towards. So UNDP since 2019 launched the Sustainable Finance Hub, which is a global unit within UNDP that's really looking at what can we be doing to start to shift capital, private, public, domestic, international, towards achieving the SDGs and assuring us of a sustainable development pathway. The role of the Sustainable Finance Hub is to develop tools and processes that will help us, all stakeholders, public and private, to really start to address and drive investment more towards the SDGs in public-private partnerships. And that's a really important part of what we do here at UNDP. And one of the big signature global flagships has been the development of the Sdg Impact Standards, an opportunity to have a framework that we can all use to articulate our impact story, to articulate our sustainability story, and that's for the public and the private. We're trying to find a language and a common set of metrics that we can all start to utilize in order to show that we are having impact on the ground, positive impact, and that everyone is playing their part, leaving no one behind. And so I'm really pleased to have partnered up with AVPA on this really exciting initiative. You'll hear a lot more about what the Sdg Impact Standards stand for, what is contained within them, and how you can utilize them in sharpening, improving your business models, your business processes, the decision-making that you take within your businesses to ensure that you are keeping sustainability and impact in mind. So I'm really looking forward to this. I don't want to belabor the point for anyone who knows the UN. We love talking, but I've been told to keep this really brief. And so I'll stop here and really thank you all for registering, signing up. We look forward to this journey, and I'll pass on to Belisa or Sarah Lisa, I think it is. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Frank. Thank you all for being here. We're very excited to see so many of you, or 54 participants at the moment. That's amazing. Thanks for taking the time, and we hope to make this, Ouagadougou, excellent. Welcome. To make this interactive and interesting for you all, please feel free to add where you're joining us from in the chat. I'm seeing Colombia. Wow. Bienvenida. And Owen from the British Council, excellent. Please feel free to add where you're coming in from. I'm Sarah Lisa Erstevik. I'm usually based in New York, but right now I'm in Bergen on the west coast of Norway. And we have Belisa. Do you want to say hi, Belisa? Belisa is trying to unmute. And she is in DC. Where it's very early in the morning. So we will be trading the presentation between us.
Sorry, Sarah Lisa, I was just waving because I thought it was faster. I'm very happy to be here today, although I have technical challenges, but happy to be here today. Thank you.
And I see Dhaka, amazing. Johannesburg, excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Ghana, okay, we're a very international crowd, excellent. So let me see if I can share my slides, and we will be aiming to keep this to under 30 minutes so that we can then have plenty of time for your questions. We will also have a couple of polls through this session where we'll be asking for your inputs on some things so that we can learn from each other. Can you see my slides? Okay, I hope that means yes. Great. All right, so here, this is an introduction to managing for impact. So you'll be hearing this term a lot today, managing for impact, because that's what we're all about. We're about management, how businesses and investors manage their internal operations so that they can deliver impact. This webinar is split into 2 webinars in a way. So this is the first one, and the next one is coming up on the 3rd of August. So today we're really going to be talking about the case for change and how our businesses around the world are currently working to deliver or not so well deliver on sustainability and the SDGs. Belissa will talk us through the key impact measurement and management concepts that are really important when we're talking about sustainability, because there's a lot of different terms out there and confusion. So what do we really mean? That's going to be key. And then we will look at the business and investment case for sustainability and the SDGs. Next time, we will look more at the Sdg Impact Standards, which we'll introduce today. But I really encourage you to join next time as well to learn more about our hands-on approach to managing holistically for impact. So I'll get started on the case for change. So why are Belissa and I doing this work? Why is UNDP working on managing for impact? So we heard the presentations or the introductions. Thank you to Frank and Joanne. And I think we're all really realizing that we have some really big problems happening in the world, affecting different countries in different ways, that we're all interconnected, and that a lot of these problems aren't really getting any better. On the contrary, a lot of them are getting worse. So we've been talking about these problems for a very long time, even longer than a decade, increasing inequalities, health issues, increasing climate change, water scarcity, lack of gender equality, economic growth, fast in some places, slow in others, backtracking, education difficulties, all kinds of issues. And I like this photo on the right, which really shows you the difference in living standards, sometimes so close to each other within the same city. What a lot of us are really realizing is that the world is sort of on the brink, where in a lot of countries, we're having these worse and worse situations happen. The globe seems to be reaching its limit, and there's been a lot of call to action saying, well, it's time to change. We need to take, all of us, responsibility as individuals, as governments, as private sector, as investors, as enterprises, and make conscious choices to actually change the path that we're on. There's a lot of urgency around this need for changing the way the world is working so that we can avoid and improve on some of these issues. So here I'm coming to the first poll. So if this case for sustainability is so clear, okay, there's climate change, there's inequalities, there's increasing poverty, what are we going to do about it? So my question for you is, if the case for sustainability is so clear, why aren't most investors already investing to make the world more sustainable? So my question is really, why hasn't this change happened already? What is blocking change from happening? So I'm going to stop. How do I do this? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm not sure how to do that. Oh, there, so that we can share this poll instead. So what I encourage you to do here is take your cell phones or go to slido.com, put in the code, and answer this question with one word, and then we'll see what everybody comes up with. Critical mass. So we're lacking critical mass. Cost. It's expensive. Nihilism. Yes, we're not willing to look at the problems in the face. A focus on returns. Lack of information. So maybe people don't know how to do it or what the problems are or how they can contribute. Credibility around metrics. I guess both on the returns is coming up really big. Bad risk return ratio is coming up as well. Costly, compliance, unclear regulatory framework. Lack of information is coming up as a big one as well. Okay, this is really interesting. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. So there seems to be this question around returns. Okay, investment. If you invest, you want returns, and perhaps if it's not clear how to make returns and contribute to sustainability at the same time, and the lack of understanding around sustainability. I see also in the chat. Does anybody want to explain what they mean by compliance? Since several people are writing about that, you can type it in the chat or unmute and contribute. And returns is really, really big. I see one more participant typing, so we'll work for that. Value proposition, political instability, return on investment, lack of clarity on the term sustainability. Okay, so a lot of reasons why change hasn't happened already and why investment isn't flowing sufficiently towards sustainable things or flowing in a sustainable way at the moment, with a big focus on returns. And in that case, I would assume that this has got to do with your short-term returns, right? Which kind of links up with this question of denialism as well. Maybe if some of these impacts seem far away, both in time or in space, we focus on what's closest to us. Okay, misaligned incentives as well, country focus. Okay, these are great answers. Thank you so much. Perfect. So then let's see. Let's see as we get through this presentation, if the work that UNDP is doing might help alleviate some of these barriers or reduce the barriers to change a little bit. That's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to catalyze change in the way investment in business is done by removing some of these barriers and by also sort of broadening the perspective, I guess, on what do we really think about in terms of success when we think about returns. How do we, what do we assign value to, and how do we make our decisions? So that's, and how do we think about returns in the long term as well. Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to share my screen again, so I think it's working. That was great. Thank you all for contributing. So I'll keep going here a little bit on the case for change then. So why is this happening? Why are we seeing that we're not really on track to achieve the SDGs in Africa, but also elsewhere around the world? And especially now in the last 2 years with COVID and now with the crisis in Ukraine, we're actually seeing that some of the progress that was made on the SDGs, we're now backtracking and we're further away from this. So why is this happening? And the World Benchmarking Alliance did a benchmark of the financial system, and they said that today the financial system does not systematically operate and support a sustainable real economy. So what we're seeing is that the financial system has become, from being a tool to advance the real economy and driving real outcomes, it has more and more become separate from what's happening in the real economy, from the needs of people and planet, and has become its own sort of creature driving for profit, very far away from its original use. It was meant to be a tool, right, to drive change in the real economy, and now it's kind of taken on a life of its own. a lot of people are talking about sustainability, and you guys mentioned that as well, that there's lack of clarity and lack of information. So I'll just quickly talk about, there's different approaches nowadays to investing sustainably, to operating a business sustainably, but there is a lot of shortcomings. The changes that we are seeing, they're not enough to actually achieve the change that we need to make a difference to the world. Some of the reasons are that the approaches that are being taken by different investors and enterprises at the moment are not complete or comprehensive. They often focus on external reporting rather than actually doing things differently. They often don't focus on the outcomes that matter most. So maybe you're a company working on meat production and you decide to reduce your consumption of paper, but maybe that wasn't the biggest outcome that really mattered to your constituency in the context that you're working. There's often a fragmented product focus. Sustainability becomes usually a niche activity. Again, there's often a focus on reporting and aligning current activities with the Sustainable Development Goals rather than actually doing things differently. And then it's been hard for investors and enterprises to fully take into account the interdependencies between different sustainability issues. So if we give to education, are we taking away from something else? And often we don't see ambitious enough goals, and also very importantly, not enough involvement of the stakeholders that are ultimately affected by the impacts of a certain investment or business activity. There is a lot of confusion in the sustainability world, and I like this image of these sailors surrounded by war and then looking at and being excited by the dolphins. We see out there in the market a lot of different standards, tools, approaches for sustainability. So in the poll, you mentioned that earlier, that there's lack of clarity. It can be very hard and challenging to unpack the impacts that we are having and to make informed decisions. And then there's this confusion around labels. So ESG versus sustainability versus impact. And Melissa will talk to us more about that shortly. So this ends up in an inefficient and suboptimal allocation of resources from all of us, from consumers, from investors, from regulators, and also from the community perspective. So what I really like on this slide is the quote by Albert Einstein. It's attributed to him. I'm not really sure it came from him, but it's attributed to Einstein, and who says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." So our systems haven't evolved in a vacuum. What's gotten us to where we are today won't really get us to where we need to be in terms of sustainability. So we need to change the way our economic systems work. That's the UNDP's approach. We can't keep going the same way that we've always gone. It might have been appropriate at some point, maybe it wasn't even then, but now we need to stop doing things in the same old way. The world has changed, and the way we make decisions, make our investments and run our businesses and make our decisions, no matter who we are, need to change with it if we're going to put it dramatically, survive in the long term. And what UNDP is really advocating for is a change in perspective. So we want to go from the current view of an organization that thinks about how the world around it is influencing it. So if I'm a business thinking about, okay, how does the economy and society and environment around me affect me and my enterprise value, we want to change that to a perspective which is inside out. So what do I, as an organization, contribute to the world around me? How do I impact the world around me, the economy, society, and environment surrounding me? So this is a change in perspective that we're trying to facilitate so that we can change our systems to be more sustainable. And it starts with all of us. So for any investment in business, what we really want to help achieve, we want to help a transition to a new normal. So we want sustainability to not longer be a sort of an add-on, a nice on the side thing that you have, but we want it to become central to how all business is done. We want to see SDG action, not just alignment. We want to see changes in how decisions are made, not just in nice reports that highlight specific SDGs. And we want to go from a simple measurement of impacts to managing intentionally for impact. We want all businesses and investors to think strategically about sustainability and what they can do about it to benefit themselves and to benefit the world around them. And we want to really change this perspective, going from managing financial risk to managing social and environmental risk. Okay, enough lecturing. What's also really exciting is that there's two very specific ways that we've seen, at least, that the private sector can contribute to sustainability. So the SDGs, as was said in the beginning, aren't just the role of governments to provide. The Sustainable Development Goals are these 17 goals that all countries agreed on between all stakeholders in society that we're aiming to achieve. So how can we all contribute to that? And for the private sector, there's two ways. One is that private sector can really help benefit stakeholders and contribute to SDG solutions by, for example, developing new products and services that benefit specific groups, can also focus on underserved markets or communities or people. And that could lead to new customers and market opportunities and accelerate innovation. So that's really exciting. And then also, private sector can, as a whole, operate sustainably and responsibly. So that means avoiding or significantly reducing current negative impacts that they're having that are currently making the gap to the SDGs bigger and bigger. So these are two things that can be done. Positive actions to advance the SDGs and reduce negative actions that are contributing to the SDGs being a bigger and bigger problem. So what we're really saying is that we need a transformational shift in mindset in management and decision-making in everything that we do. And what we've provided as Sdg Impact, as UNDP, is a set of standards. So it's all nice and well that I say that I would like all businesses and investors to think about sustainability in every decision they make, but what does that actually mean and how do you do that? That can be very confusing, overwhelming, strange, foreign, new, difficult. So what we've tried to do is create a practical guidance for how to do that. So we've created Sdg Impact Standards for private equity funds, for enterprises, and for bonds that help really any organization put sustainability at the core of their business and investment decision-making practices. So that really focuses on your internal decision-making as any type of organization. So that means we focus on how you as an organization set your strategy, what your management approach is like, how you report, so your transparency practices, and your overall governance structure. Is sustainability really at the core of all of those? The standards show you how to do that. So they're an internal decision-making framework to help businesses and investors be sustainable, resilient, and prosperous in the long term. As I mentioned, these are the different standards that we have. We also have a fourth set for DFIs, and they can really be used by all kinds of users to improve their sustainability management practices. And that was a lot of information, so I leave it at that for now, and we're happy to take questions on that later. But first, I'm going to hand this over to Belissa, who will talk to us a bit more about these IMM concepts and what do we really mean when we're saying all these terms. Thank you. Belissa?
Thank you, Sara Lisa. And everyone, just a reminder that you can ask any questions on the chat. I know we will be sharing a lot of information over these two sessions, but please feel free to get back to us with questions at any point. Sara Lisa mentioned really well that we really need to change the way we do business and invest and do it in a more sustainable way, right? Where we avoid doing harm, negative impact, and try to have a positive impact. But then, you know, if you remember your own answers to the first question, what is sustainability? What does it mean? So what are we really talking about? So the reason why I'm spending some time, and I hope you're not disappointed, because we are going to do really the deep dive on the standards in the next sessions with more details. So you need to know for now, if you bear with us, thanks for the patience, that we need to find a different way of doing businesses. We have this approach that the standards, cover, but before getting into that, it's really important to be clear about what do we mean by sustainability and other concepts. So this is what we're going to do in the next few minutes. And Sara Lisa, I think if we go next, we have a question for everyone. So yes, our question is actually your question. What does sustainability mean to you? And if you can, please provide your answers. Sara Lisa is going to share again a tool.
Or Abu, can you share the poll? And this time, if you sign into Slido, then you'll have to choose between the different options. And if you're not happy with any of them, then you can type into the chat instead.
Thank you, Sara Lisa.
Sure. Okay, 2 responses so far. Thank you. So
Yes.
very, very fast. We have 13 responses so far, and 93% are answering the first one, and no one is.
Maybe we can hide the responses so they are not biased.
Maybe. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Maybe a bit late now.
Sharing the screen now. And also there's 50 of you or more, so if you can please respond, it's going to be good to hear your voices, your opinions.
I'll mute myself, Alyssa, and you can comment on the results.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. We can comment together. So we have different options, right? So make sure you screen down and then you pick your favorites. We're going to give it 1 more minute and then we continue, if that's okay with you.
So we have an interesting comment in the chat from Kamisha, who says the first response is consistent with the academic definition, but I wonder whether it is still relevant and truly achievable in the current context.
Thank you. So, okay, we have 50% of answers. And I just want to share with you the reason why we don't do it in Zoom, although it's easier, is because we are using this information for other webinars and kind of collecting around the world what people are thinking about sustainability. So your voice is really important. So thank you for participating. So I guess now we can see the results, please. Okay, thank you. So yes, the academic definition seems to have won. And what is sustainability? Based on this one, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. Sustainability is also for some of us about long-term profit and economic growth, right? Making businesses sustainable over time, achieving the SDGs, better choices. Excellent, thank you very much. So the real purpose of sharing this is that we really want to listen to you and acknowledge, first of all, that there are many definitions out there, and there's a different understandings of what not only sustainability is, but also what impact is, what ESG is. You name it, there's a definition, there's a perspective. So it's really important to be kind of aware of that and humbly accept it. And here we're not trying to lecture you on what is the right definition. Our purpose is really to tell you what definitions we use for the purposes of the standards, right? So in the next session, we're going to talk about the standards, the business actions in the context of the definitions we will provide today. So if we can go back, please, to the slide deck, that would be fantastic. There's another comment on the chat: managing risk, a more appropriate definition with businesses. Excellent. Okay. So thank you, first of all. As I said, the reasons we're going to talk about key concepts is not to have a joint definition for all of us on what it should be. It's going to be more to be on the same page in terms of what definitions we're using at UNDP for the Sdg Impact Standards. So we're going to cover sustainability, ESG, that was also mentioned in the chat, SDGs, that was an option in the answers, impact, risk management is going to be linked to ESG, and then we're going to talk about the difference between, side-to-side ESG and sustainability, and what does it mean, this impact measurement and management and managing for impact. And at the end of, after reviewing the concepts, we're going to talk briefly about, okay, so there are different definitions, different approaches to understand this, but also there are different tools. So that's what we're going to do at the end before I hand it back to Sarah Lisa. Thank you, Sarah Lisa. Next. So we mentioned this definition that was in the survey, and I mentioned at the beginning, is provided by the UN World Commission on Environment and Development. And one of your comments was, is this relevant? So for us at UNDP, we think it's really relevant for the world to think about our generation being able to meet its needs without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. This means that, we need to live in a way that doesn't undermine future people to do the same. Okay, so it's prosperity in the long run. And we feel this is really relevant because this is what is at stake at the moment. Sarah Lisa explained it really nicely. We have a climate crisis, humanitarian crisis, food crisis, etc. So we need to find a way of not depleting the resources of the planet and making people prosperous for the long term. Now, is that easy? No, it's not easy, but we believe that this is what is necessary when we think about the future of humanity. So this is a definition we're going to use for our conversation. So when we say sustainability, this is what we mean by sustainability. Next. When we talk about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, we're going to really recognizing again that many people talk about ESG in different ways. The definition we will use for this audience, this context, this space, is to think about the risk management approach, right? How organizations, how businesses manage environmental, social, and governance risk that can affect their value, their financial value, their operations, their business models, right? That put them at risk financially. So this is related to the option of a risk management approach or for managing risks. So think of this about not how as an organization I affect people and planet, but how what's going on with people and the planet affects me as an organization. Okay, so this is what we mean by ESG. And therefore, all of you that manage an enterprise or a business or have studied maybe economics or finance, this is the risk management part of running a business. And in today's world, these factors are more relevant. The environment today is more relevant in our supply chain than 20 years ago. So this is the ESG risk management approach. Having said that, when you go outside this room, we will see that many people talk about ESG as also doing good for its workers, trying to have some impact. So let's acknowledge that, be aware of that, but knowing that we're talking in this context about the managing risks that affect the enterprise. Thank you. Next, please, Sarah Lisa. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that most of you, from what I read in the answers, know. So they are these, they really are these goals that were the result of a consensus between, all UNDP government member countries, that they agree that this is what is needed, that what we need to achieve to really create a life of peace and prosperity for all of us, right? So the SDGs have become like the North Star, the guiding framework, not only for governments, but also for the private sector in terms of, this is what is needed, what we need to achieve if we really want to be prosperous as humanity and sustainable, meaning being okay ourselves, but also making sure that 2 generations after us, they can still do the same. So these are the sustainable development goals. They are related to the concept of sustainability, as you know, and they are really being endorsed by both public, private sectors and third sector. And something that is really important in our work is that we know that to achieve these SDGs, we need the private sector to be engaged and have a very important role on this road towards sustainability. Next, please. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and then we will have some time for questions at the end too. So, there's a lot of wording here, and the idea is that you can take these slides with you and go back to them as needed. But when we talk about impact, we talk about really 3 things in 3 dimensions: the economic and financial impact, number 1; number 2, the social impact; and the environmental impact. This is really important because sustainability and impact is not just about the social part or the environmental part, but also about the financial and economics, right? We're talking about private sector to be sustainable. That means that we want private sector to find a way of making money and having a positive impact on people and planet. And we believe that is possible. So impacts can be economic and financial, environmental or social. They can also be positive or negative. They can be intended or unintended, and they can be direct or indirect. And this is the concept we're going to use. And please, if we go to the next slides, when we talk about making a positive contribution to people and the planet, is about having an overall, right, impact towards, the SDGs, towards sustainability. And this slide is really to illustrate, what do we mean by impact? So as organizations, businesses, or even governments and NGOs, all of us, we can create certain products or services or do certain activities with the hope that this is going to generate a result, right? So we control the activities, the inputs and the outputs, what we produce, but we don't control the expected outcomes and impacts, but they are under our influence. So if we take an example that we all know, which is what happened, when we had to face the COVID crisis. So if you think about Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, all these vaccine producers, what they did is to produce a vaccine. So the output is vaccines produced. However, they did that because they were hoping to help us fighting the virus and create it in the long-term herd immunity, right? They wanted people to be vaccinated, so the hospitalizations and mortality rates would be reduced, and in the long term, we would create herd immunity. However, as you can see, and this is the idea of this slide, the vaccine producers on their own cannot get us to be vaccinated. To be vaccinated, governments need to procure those vaccines and buy them, right? They need to put in place, the vaccination centers. There needs to be campaigns for people of communication that show that they are safe. There's need, even the transportation of the vaccine. So this is just to tell you that if we think about SDG 17 of collaboration, many times we are going to have a role in achieving the desired impact, but we will need others to also do their part and work on other products and services. So together we can achieve the desired change. So the vaccines produced won't be of any help if these vaccines are not accessible and available for people. And we have seen that very sadly when some countries manage to get the vaccines very quickly and their population vaccinated while other countries could not, right? So this is exactly what we're talking about. So outputs, what we produce, what others are doing. So together we achieve the desired impacts and outcomes that we want to influence on people and the planet. So this is really the concept that we're talking about. I hope this doesn't discourage you in the sense that, oh, we don't control the impacts, there's nothing we can do, because the message is really, there's a lot you can do, but most likely you cannot do it alone. So let's join forces with others and understand how our actions influence the desired impact over time. Next, please. And I think I just have 2 slides to go, so please don't worry. And again, this is not a lecture, it's really more about being in the same page in terms of concepts. So ESG versus sustainability after what we spoke, and I hope it is clear that sustainability is linked to impacts, right? Impacts on people and planet and the economy. So ESG, how the world impacts me. Sustainability, how I impact the world. And when I say I, it could be an enterprise, it could be myself, it could be a government organization, it could be a fund, right? All of us have an impact on people and the planet. The goal of ESG, traditionally speaking, how do we protect the financial value of the enterprise, of the investment? The goal from the sustainability perspective is what is the value we created in terms of financials, but also in terms of environmental and social impacts for the planet. And then ESG is more incrementalist. You manage the risk as they come. Sustainability, it really encompasses not only your products and services, but your operations and everything you do in your enterprise. And here, the bottom line is that we're talking about very different concepts, right? One is managing risks that affect the enterprise in its financial activities. The other is how the enterprise affects people and the planet. And this is how we're going to use the term. So if you hear me talking, or Sara Lisa or David Mueller or others at UNDP about ESG, that's what we're talking about, risk management. And sustainability impact is really about from the organization towards the world. Next, please. When we talk about managing for impact, and I'm going to go please to the next slide, Sara Lisa, because that you can read. So many times in our work, when they call us because they want to see us again, and I hope you do too, they ask us, please, Belisa, Sara Lisa, what are the indicators we should use? How do we measure this? So there is that part of the work that we call impact measurement, right? Which is when we understand, okay, how many people will be vaccinated? How much is the rate of hospitalization be reduced if people get vaccinated? How much is the mortality rate decrease if we get vaccinated, right? So it's all about measuring and getting information about the impacts we want to have or about the problems we want to solve. Impact management is the so what. So for example, the vaccines are available where I live in Maryland, the vaccination centers are there, but what about people not going get the vaccine and the vaccination rates being very low? So when you use this data to improve things, we're talking about impact management, right? I expected, 60% of vaccination rates in the first week, and we are at 20%. So that tells me that something is not going well, and therefore I need to take action. That is managing the impacts I'm having, right? And why am I managing that impact? Because if you remember for the previous slide, it's really about, I'm hoping that if I produce the vaccine, I have the vaccination centers ready, I have the right comms, my vaccination rates should be, and I don't remember the name, but let's say 70%. And actually, I'm at 20. So there's a gap between what I expected and what happened, and I want to take action to improve that. So that's managing that's an impact management. And then when in Sdg Impact at UNDP, we talk about managing for impact, it's really what I call a little bit revolutionary, because it's about putting impact at the core of the purpose of the enterprises and the private sector. So what we are proposing to you, and we know it's provocative and it should be, I believe, it's about redefining what the role of the private sector is. So it goes beyond making money and also doing good. So then you manage for success, but success of the enterprise will mean, financial returns and impact returns. So that's what we believe is going to take us to achieve that word where we enter in a sustainable path of prosperity. Next, please. And again, this is our definitions of how we're going to use the terms. So we measure impact, we manage the deviations, but then we embed impact in who we are, in our purpose, and then we start managing to achieve that impact and that financial return. Based on this concept, we put together this slide to try to, not to confuse you, although there are many logos, but hopefully to clarify. So if we recognize that ESG and sustainability sometimes are used as synonyms, but now we know that there's one trend that focuses on financial returns, managing environmental, social risk that affects the financial returns. And there are other trends that talk about how the organization is impacting the planet. Then you can see, who is doing what in terms of tools, standards, and frameworks. So for example, I like really a lot SASB, and SASB, what they do is they really provide an ESG framework to manage financial risk by sectors, and they have a lot of dimensions and indicators you can look at if you want to manage, external risk related to the environment, social, and governance that can affect the value of the enterprise. Now, the counterpart, if you want to do the same for impact, would be GRI, the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. And where we see it, because we talk about standards, and then many people also think that we're talking about reporting standards. We are really about having a management approach, as Sara Lisa mentioned, to, if my goal as an organization is to create financial return, money, and impact, how do I need to set up, my organization, my internal processes, my systems, my strategy to be able to deliver on that intent, to become a company that wants to do well and wants to do good. If that's my DNA, how do I do it? That's where the standards help you. And then you can compare what other tools help you. If you want indicators, you have HIPSO indicators, you have IRIS Plus, right? So we are aligned to all of that, but we have a very specific role on helping organizations managing themselves to achieve that impact. Next slide, please. And then here is a summary. There is a lot of focus on reporting, so that's why we did this. So we are not a framework to help you reporting. There are not standards on reporting. Reporting is part of the overall management of the organization, but it's not the focus of the standards. So in the same way that that you have strategies for your business models to generate, more sales, that you have policies in place, resources, and then you report it. With impact is going to be the same when you use the SDG Impact Standards. So it's really about going beyond reporting to do business differently, and that includes reporting, but they are not reporting standards. So that just illustrates that. We're very well aligned with European regulation because they really focus on acting to avoid harm, which is part of the standards, but the standards will also encourage you to try to do good and solve social and environmental problems as much as possible. So this is all what I had to do today from my end. So I know it's a lot of information. We will share the slides. And very importantly, this is not because we think we hold the truth. This is how we define the concepts in the context of the standards we're going to talk about next week. And it's just really important to make sure that we are talking about the same things in terms of definition, not only in terms of words, because there's a lot out there. Sara Lisa, back to you. Thank you.
Hey, Sara Lisa, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you hear me earlier?
No, we could not. Now we can.
Oh, sorry. I was asking how much time we have left to know how quickly to go through this last part.
Take another 5 or so minutes.
All right, I will go quickly. Thank you, Belissa. And I'm seeing some really good comments in the chat, so I hope we can take those up in the Q&A. So we were asked to speak a bit to the business and investment case for sustainability, and I want to start that by actually just pushing it back on you and taking us out to another Slido. So if you can get that started, Frank or Abu, then we want to hear from you a few words on what you think the business and or investment case for sustainability and the SDGs might be. Really putting you on the spot here. And if there is none, then, oh, 2 participants are typing, that's good. Come on, everybody. Accountability. Interesting. Emerging opportunities. All right. More people typing, so that's really good. Common sense, additionality, market value, social responsibility, continuity of business, long-term performance, risk management, return on investment, high impact businesses, long-term sustained returns, yes, which is very different from short-term. Accountability, again, improved valuation. Reputation is a good one also, yes. Smarter, cleaner planet, accountability on business, profitable responsibility, more return on investment, tracking impact and progress, new business models, true. Better impact in the future, transparency, generative markets, accountability again, seems like to be a big one. Identifying societal challenges that could be addressed through business lenses. Unlocking business value through tackling SDGs. That's very nice. Market demand reporting, opportunities leading to sustainable economic development and growth, which will be useful for the businesses and private sector. Continuous learning, continuity and accountability. Tracking impact on progress and long-term returns. I don't think you need me here. It seems like you're quite on top of the business case for sustainability. Humanity, accountability, and new market opportunities. Compliance. So I'll give it 60 more seconds. So type quickly, societal transformation, long-term sustainability. Triple bottom line, financial statement reporting. Okay, great. Thank you all. This is really, really excellent. And speaks directly to, yeah, the next slides that I'm coming up with. Okay, one more participant, risk management. Okay. Thanks, we've recorded all your answers. This is really going to be useful for us as well. So I appreciate you contributing to that. And since we're almost out of time, let me just make the point that sustainability increasingly is a major disruptor for businesses and investors. So it's really coming in to shake up how our world looks and what our role is in it and how we do our work, whether we want to or not. Now with the energy crisis, we're seeing, well, not necessarily good outcomes come out of it, but sustainability, different issues, social and environmental, are disrupting our businesses in different ways. And also sustainability can be seen as a core capability that businesses and investors need to adapt to potential impacts of global trends. So there's just these different ways to see it. And in terms of the business case, we've divided it up on some different drivers. So on the business side, many of you spoke to these. So this using sustainability to enhance long-term return potential and to reduce systemic risk. So making sure from your business side that you're not just profitable today, but you will be profitable in 5 years, in 20 years, dare I say 50 years. Attracting capital, and increasingly people are concerned about sustainability and want to invest in sustainable businesses or in something that they believe in. So attracting capital and like-minded investors. You also mentioned risks. So yes, to identify and manage emerging risks, and then to identify emerging market trends, and social and environmentally oriented investment opportunities ahead of the curve. So if you're, capitalizing on a first mover advantage by identifying somewhere where you can really contribute to sustainability, to the sustainable development goals, to a social impact, to an environmental impact, and make money at the same time, that's a really big opportunity, even from the business case. So I think you all mentioned most of these. We also see drivers coming from stakeholders. So more and more consumers and customers are asking to see the practices of the organization, the impact, the positive impact, the reduced carbon footprint, for example, reducing negative impacts and having more positive impacts. So it's coming from the stakeholders, from customers, it's coming from employees to attract and retain talent. A lot of people coming into the workforce are looking for meaning, are looking to be able to look at their neighbors' children in the eyes and say that I'm contributing to a better world for you. And a lot of people are seeking to feel that they're contributing positively to society as well. And we've got the reputational drivers, so drivers around values, and also organizations protecting their social license to operate and their reputation, like some of you mentioned before. There's also regulatory drivers. So increasingly we see regulatory pressure on investors and companies around the globe to be sustainable. And we only expect those to increase. So moving ahead of those and being ready when those regulations happen has been seen as really important. And then we do see that many people have a strong desire to do good. That is also really important. So that's it for today. Thank you all so much. And I'm just gonna leave it there so that we can take questions and have a conversation with you for the remaining time. And just as a reminder, today we looked at the case for change, the key IMM principles, the business and investment case, and next time we'll look at managing for impact more in detail with the standards, and looking at developing an implementation roadmap for the standards. And also I'm going to tangle the carrot of assurance out there, so getting recognized for your good practice if you adopt the standards. Thank you all so much.
So Berelisa and Saralisa, thank you so much. We are now in the Q&A section. I've actually never been on a panel where the speakers' names rhyme as much as your names do. So quite interesting. I'm sure it's quite confusing sometimes. But nonetheless, it's really good to have you here and thank you for a well done presentation. At least for me, a lot of stuff has fallen in place. So we'd be happy to take some questions. So as a couple of questions come through, hopefully we'll get to people to ask. And if you feel you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, we'd be open to that as well. But in the meantime, for both of you, you know, we've had this conversation a couple of times where do the private sector and corporates have to feel that they are compromising by playing in the sustainability space? Are they losing? Is playing in the sustainability space profitable in essence? Can you still run a business while being a sustainable and responsible business? That's my question. And is there any data to inform a view into that question?
You want me to take that? Yes. Do you want me to take that, Saralisa? Yes. So, Frank, this is a great question and a very hard to answer, because we all want to hear, of course, you know, you can do good and you can do well and it's gonna be awesome always. And we have data of that when we see, you know, new areas of that are coming, like energy, you know, sustainable energy, clean energy. We have examples of that. We have examples, you know, with producers of organic food, plant-based meat and all that. There are opportunities for developing new businesses and do that in a successful way, because the demand is changing, right? So there's going to be openings in the markets to develop products and services that are going to be attractive and profitable. But that's not mainstream yet, right? Not everybody wants to be a vegetarian. Not everybody has clean energy, and not everybody is driving a Tesla. And all these examples that I mentioned, you can say, "Oh, right, Belisa, but there was so much investment behind, right? So much innovation. So maybe it's not as accessible." So the answer is, on the new markets, yes, we are seeing that there is data, there is evidence, but also, of course, there's risk. But we can see, as Saralisa said, there is a disruption and it's changing. So that's the direction we're heading towards. And if we think about this as the Industrial Revolution, when big changes came, we just need start to think to be doing well in the future. that we can do well by doing good, but looking at opportunities. Where are these openings? What is coming? What are the trends in the markets in terms of the consumer's demand? Okay, so that's one area. Now, in the other one, we have the push now from regulators, right? Start being, more responsible. It's going to have a cost. First of all, you need to set up a system to understand what's your impacts. Where am I having negative impacts? And how do I manage that? But what's going to happen again is that even if there's a cost in the short term, and there's going to be a cost, and we are in transition, right? It's going to be linked to regulatory requirements. So the sooner you do it, the better, because it's coming, and it's coming for all of us. In developing countries, we have some time for transitioning, but we need to start thinking about that transition. And number two, when the demand is changing, consumers will also ask us to be responsible. So in a more personal view, I think there's going to be cost associated to transition towards a more sustainable model, but this is here to stay, right? So the sooner we do it, the better. But then an invitation to, and I know it's not applicable when we're struggling to get our business to grow, but what is enough in terms of how much growth I want? Because sometimes it's about, and we had a debate yesterday, and I can share that with you because it's really interesting. I was with a big global company that produces furniture globally, a big, big company. And the discussion they're having, we have more sustainable furniture. But are we going to keep advertising so consumers consume more and more and more of the sustainable? Or we should also tell them that they can keep this longer and they don't need to buy as much. So I'm talking about a global leader having those reflections, because how much is enough, right? So I'm sorry that my answer has many dimensions. Yes, there's a business case. Yes, there is a cost, but at the end, this is what is going to be the new normal, and we need to be there. But also, it's about the decisions and the considerations that we make in terms of the future we want to create. And maybe that global corporate, and I'm not saying it's the same case for a small VC, but think about what happened in a small company when Uber was small and then got bigger and had problems with their workers, right? So to me, it's really about redefining how we do business and finding a way or where financial returns and impact converge. And I'm sure that after this transition, that's going to be the new demand in the future. In years ahead, everything will have to be sustainable if we want to prosper, right? But if it were easy, we will be already there, right? Yes. So we need to work a little bit on that, make it happen.
I guess what you're saying is that we can't continue with what we're doing at the moment in terms of how we're doing business in many places. And I think if you look at some of the big movements in the recent past that have shaken the world, Black Lives Matter, the COVID crisis, even the Russia-Ukraine war, there's a lot of things that are telling us we've got to do things differently. And we've got to be thinking about and climate change as well. We've got to be thinking about different ways of achieving and measuring success. And it leads to alignment to a comment from Carlo Ruiz here, who says, how to improve the ESG standards. I have the feeling it's now easier and easier to use them since bad businesses have managed to manipulate them and show success stories while having sketchy backgrounds. But I guess this is why the SDG standards would really help, is to avoid greenwashing and inconsistent reporting when the framework is adopted and applied is one that you can measure objectively, good or bad, and you can even compare amongst companies. Am I right in that making that assumption?
That's exactly it. So as Salisa said, I think we can go home because you guys got it. It's exactly that. And what we wanted to do with the standards are, well, three things, right? Repurposing, like what if we dream of a world when we can be in business responsibly and doing good? Two, how do we do that, the approach? But three, recognizing those enterprises, those businesses that are serious about it. And today, they are not able to distinguish themselves from those that are just doing a marketing report, right? Or a marketing campaign. So we hope that the standards will give you the credentials to say, I'm not perfect. It's not that I do everything well. It's really about my journey where I am committed to do everything I can to be good for the planet, creating jobs financially, but also for people and in a broader way, and the environment. So that's what the standards are about. The spirit is commitment to do good and to do well, and the journey of doing your best, not the destination necessarily. It's more about a practice and what the enterprises are trying to do. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and I think to my earlier question, it's supported by a comment from Kalnisha Singh, who says market trends are showing that funds employing sustainable lenses have performed consistently with traditional funds over the past 3 to 4 years. And this is a Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. I've been quoted. She's quoted, or he or she has quoted them there. But I guess this was also, once again, as more evidence is gathered, we're probably going to get more clarity in this direction. But early trends are very encouraging.
Yes, something to be careful about anyway is that if what we're talking about is they're managing better the risks, environmental and social, of course the financial return is going to be better, right? So there's a lot of information out there. So just, what are you talking about? ESG management, how, for what purpose? Oh, so then is that a piece of information. There were people angry also in this meeting because you know how I think it was Shell that got a better ESG rating than Tesla, and they all mad about it. And I'm like, but if you read what they're measuring is how they manage the risk to protect the financial value. Now, we understand sustainability and then we get mad, but we were doing something else, right? So not to add on the confusion, I think it's really clear if you look back at our graph, managing risk or impact. You just need to do double click and read what they're talking about. And then you say, oh, that's what they're talking about. And then it's very, as you said, Frank.
Yeah. And Sarah Lisa and Belisa, so tell me, do you think we'll get to a point where disclosure will be imperative, that stock exchanges and regulators are going to force corporates to disclose their sustainability records, in essence, and is there an advantage for a fast move advantage for corporates who are proactive in understanding that that's possibly coming, and we should take the lead in, as if no one was watching us, if no one was watching us, what would be the right thing for us as a corporate to do? Do you think that's coming somewhere down the road?
We think it's coming and we hope it's coming, and we're doing what we can to make it happen. Our plan with the standards that are about, they really capture the best practices for embedding sustainability at the core of your investment and business decision making. We are trying to influence regulators around the world to pay attention to these standards and to build in the imperative of managing for impact into their regulations. To be honest, our director, her plan is global domination. So she wants I'm sorry, that comes out very wrong, but she really wants the standards to be out there. UNDP really wants standards to be out there, to be taken as the new framework for how all business gets done. And so yes, a first mover advantage for sure. In some form or other, this is happening. It doesn't have to be through the standards. It's not really about the product. It's about this change of perspective and how business gets done, and really looking beyond financial gain to social and environmental value. And that is happening around the world. So my answer to that is yes. Melissa, do you want to add on anything?
Just something that I also learned in the last couple of days that were very productive now, I noticed, that the G7 and the G20, they are really pushing for better transparency, accountability, and credibility. However, there is an acknowledgement, and it has to be, that in a summary, right, kind of the global north with its development is largely responsible for the crisis, and the costs are being taken, by developing countries and poorer economies. So there is this acknowledgement of a just transition, and what can we do to help enterprises to get where they need to be? Otherwise, it's going to be, again, another penalty for us in developing countries, like, oh my God, so you created this, another regulation is coming, and then you have the resources and we're not ready. So all of that because it's coming. So it's coming, regulation is coming, and it's going to be here to stay. And we are working not only to promote this change in mindset, but also to provide the resources. So in developing countries, we can do that transition in a successful way and give courses and training and help building the capacity. So the default at the end of the day should be for the world, right? For all of us, as best we can, being in business, without doing harm. That's the minimum. And so just to tell you that that I'm hoping that push is as strong as the other, because we need to support each other to get there, right? It's not going to happen on its own. Thank you, Sarah.
And that's a really good point, Alyssa. And if we're trying to change the mainstream of investment in business activity, and I do think it's really important that we focus on first where most of global capital is held, and making that operate for sustainability.
Yeah, and just a question on the standards, by the way, they are globally applicable because one of the things we always find in Africa that sometimes corporates would behave more responsibly in their home countries than they would when they came to Africa. If these were adopted, do we expect consistency in terms of what is acceptable and what we measure as success from corporates across the world?
I don't know if you can rephrase the question. Sorry, I was reading a question in the chat.
So one of the issues we've had is the inconsistency of ethical standards or operational standards from international companies when they're operating back home and when they're operating in Africa, for example. If we look at these SDG standards, are they globally consistent? Are we in Africa, should we be comfortable that we're not going to be disadvantaged? And these standards might help us because they'll create consistency of expectations across the world of any corporate that's, whether you're operating in the US, the UK, or whatever, or Africa, will get a fair kind of deal from all corporates who are abiding to these standards.
Yes.
That really is the purpose, because the standards ask a company and organization to consider their impacts and analyze their impacts and proactively manage their impacts along their value chain. So even if you're based in Germany and a lot of your operations are there and you're a German company, if you are, doing anything in some way, shape, or form in Brazil, Ghana, South Africa, Bangladesh, then the standards ask you to manage those impacts and set certain minimum standards for what is considered acceptable or not. So Melissa, you can fill in more on that, but yes, that is very much the hope. The purpose.
Lisa, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, good. So let's go to Owen's question. He asks, do you see a need for impact-weighted accounts to really make progress towards SDGs? And do you think this is a realistic goal or a dream that distracts us from other things that can be more immediately achieved? And he puts a link there to an impact-weighted accounts page.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for the question. This is an excellent question, and I see this audience is very advanced, so I'm hoping that you found this useful. The impact-weighted accounts, but it's really about monetizing the impacts and including them in the accounting of the companies. And it's an initiative that started with Harvard, and so it's really interesting. And I think they have opened, some documents for consultation right now. So this is the time to look at if you're interested. We at UNDP, I would say in the SDG Impact team, we believe that monetization has a role and gives you a piece of information. However, impact has existed before the private sector was interested on this. And those of you that have worked in development, we do economic analysis and try to monetize the impact. And there's a lot of assumptions behind the monetization. And also, and maybe most importantly, there are social aspects of impact that how do you monetize? How do you monetize the impact on the life of a person, right? So it's controversial, and I personally don't think it's gonna be the silver bullet it wants to be, and it's gonna solve, for all our problems in terms of measuring impact and managing it, right? It's reducing impact to a number to put it at the same level of the financial return. So I'm a little bit personally skeptical. I think it has a role. I think it's going to give you a piece of information, but when you analyze the impacts, you're going to have quantitative data, but also qualitative data and other information that's going to be important that you cannot monetize and that you need to be considering, right? So just more from a monitoring and evaluation development hat, I think it has a role. I don't think it's a silver bullet. I think it has advantages and limitations, and it should be used in the context of a broader picture. So that's what I would say. Let's see how it evolves. Maybe they surprise me. Maybe they come up with something, nobody has thought about it, and then in a year, they really made it to something very useful. But based on the experience of decades in the development sector trying to monetize, and the social part of it. Let's take it as one methodology that gives me one piece of information that needs to be complemented by others. That would be my 2 cents on this. But I don't hold the truth, and let's see what comes up. And I hope they do great, because they're really trying to do the same thing as we do, right? What many of us are just trying. So we need to try, prototype, and improve. So that is very welcome, their efforts.
And I'm sure there'll be an iterative process towards improving the standards as we go along through practice and learning. Just one quick question. Where in the world have the standards been rolled out? Just for someone's asked me that question. Where in the world has the standards been rolled out?
So I think we're not very good at rolling out big campaigns. In general, we can do better. We're a very small team. We have been working a lot on producing the materials, but recently we just did a big launching, and maybe Saralisa can help me, in Japan, in the Asian countries. We have a lot of presence, and there's a lot of demand for us to just, share the standards. We launch our train the trainers there. So it's been very welcome. There's momentum. They want us to go back. So we are working in that market because of the demand, but we're working also globally. But we just have done soft launches, right? Okay, here is the standards, the latest version, very modest things. So not a big splash, I would say. We have demand all over the world, small companies, global companies. We are improving our own monitoring system now to be able to tell you more. We work with startups in Latin America and Colombia, specifically, others, in Singapore, if I remember. Singapore? No, Malaysia. So we are all over the world, but we haven't done a big splash and a big launch, I would say. But we are here, the product is ready, and is ready to be used and improved, right? We are very aware that we are all learning, including us. So what we need is, you using them, telling us what works, what doesn't, what was useful, and what we can improve. So hopefully we can mainstream, and more companies in the world can use the standard. Saralisa, I don't know if you want to complement, since you've been there long.
Let me just add that in the first poll, you also mentioned lack of information, lack of knowledge. So the standards and managing for impact is one part of that. And as Melissa said, global launch, we want to do country by country launches. We do want to prioritize Asia and Africa, in addition to the US and Europe, but we do a little bit at a time and what we can with the funding we have. What I also wanted to bring your attention to was that we have another product called the Sdg and Master Maps, and they're available on the Sdg and Master platform. And those are really meant to fill the knowledge gap about how doing business can doing good can also be good business. They identify specific investment opportunity areas, meaning specific business models that show potential in the market, that have both significant potential, impact potential, and financial potential. And these are available in a lot of countries in Africa, but also countries around the world. We have about 20 of them now on the platform, and another 20 are being developed. So you can go and find those on the website, and they're meant to sort of fill a knowledge gap and help investors and enterprises change their strategies and identify specific projects and develop their business models towards some of these areas to really contribute to the SDGs. So if you use them together, the Sdg and Master Maps, to tell you sort of what to invest in, what to do your business focused on to advance the SDGs in a context, and you use that together with the management for impact approach of the standards that really tell you how to operate so that you will really achieve maximum impact and reduce your negative impact. Together, we think they can be really game-changing in countries to advance that. So we'll add the link in the well, yeah, we already have it. Thank you all.
Yes, exactly. So Belisa and Saralisa, I'm going to ask you one more question before we conclude. And for the audience, if you don't mind staying with us for another 5 minutes past the top of the half hour, would really appreciate it. But just there's a question from Lisa Ann about what kind of partnerships do you think assist the private sector to be more sustainable? And where do community-based organizations come in? What should those partnerships look like beyond just funding CSI, small scale or income generation projects, so that there's meaningful engagement? And that ties in to a lower question from Sean Samuels, who asks, for businesses to make a substantive and sustainable change, we may also need to reframe our understanding of the consumer of the future. And I think we're seeing consumers demanding more of corporates in terms of how they produce. Are they producing and offering services and products in a sustainable manner? I think that's going to grow. And Sean continues to say, more specifically, communities. Is there potential for businesses to help communities unlock their local financial and non-financial assets as part of a sustainable response? And he says, without community involvement, SDGs will not be realized. So in essence, it's partnerships of businesses and communities. How, what makes them more sustainable? What are the things we need to be paying attention to? That kind of stuff.
I can share my thoughts, and then Belisa can come in. So to me, both of these questions, they're really good questions. Thank you. And they speak to one of the really core parts of the standards and managing for impact, which is engaging your stakeholders meaningfully. And by stakeholders, we don't just mean the owners of your capital or your board or your employees. We really mean the stakeholders who's experiencing the impacts. So how do you meaningfully engage with communities, with people, with groups within those communities? How do you ensure that in your strategy and in your approaches to supposedly advance the SDGs, you're actually listening to and working with those that are impacted? So that's really essential if we want to transform our investment in businesses to deliver on the SDGs, to really work together with those that are impacted. So and also listening to your consumers and the consumers of the future, your employees of the future, and using the tools that you already have at your disposition. Maybe you're already collecting some sort of data. Maybe you already know things about them, about what's important to them, and using that to really think about how you're going to transition to this new normal where impact is core to what you do, and not assuming that right? So this is also something that's really important. In order to really understand impact, it needs to be understood from the perspective of those people or groups or the environment or whoever is experiencing those impacts, and focusing not just at high-level groups, but what are the subgroups within those, and are people who's marginalized, who's not listened to, who gets to have a seat at the table or influence the debate. So really in impact, it's about identifying where you're having negative and positive, and understanding how that affects different groups in different ways, and having a real understanding of what the problem really is. And you can only do that not by assuming that you know what other people know, but by making efforts to really engage and listen and work with. So that's my answer to that. I don't know if, and we're really looking to see more examples. We have examples of people doing this well. There is guidance on how to do it well. And if anybody has good examples, we're really eager to hear them as well. Belisa?
And just two ideas for you. That was excellent, Saralisa. One is using your associations to have these discussions. And so shall we engage, and we're here, so I can say UNDP and try the standards or other standards. Should we start this conversation and kind of partner to create that awareness that I think Juanita was talking about with companies, and then because when you are together, you're stronger, right? So that's one, using your own existing mechanisms to bring this topic to the table. And the second one, and I love the perspective of communities, you have a voice to also tell the world and these other global corporations you do business with that here in my country, in this context, it's different, right? And this is what it means to be sustainable here. And it has a higher emphasis on the people and maybe less on environment or vice versa, or this part of the environmental problem and not the other, right? So this is the opportunity of creating that long-term sustainability for communities and bring their voice to be heard across the globe. There is an initiative to educate consumers globally, but imagine a message that's universal in terms, we should care about sustainability, we should be doing better. But what does it look like in this community, you know, in Uganda versus, you know, in California for avocado growers? So we all should care, but it means different things in my context. And that's the opportunity that I see you have if you act together to bring those voices to the global conversation where there is a lot of education also for them, that the world is not just seen from their lens, but from a global perspective, right? So coordination with your associations and bringing the voice of the communities. That would be my 2 cents. Thank you. Frank, we can hear you.
Sorry, I was unmuted. And thank you so much. And Juanita Nunes, I totally agree with your comment that where you say that this is so important when convincing corporations as the global consumer trends for the next years show strong trends to impact and sustainability. I think the consumer is becoming a lot more aware, and I think will potentially punish corporates that are not supporting the well-being and living of communities across the world. So I want to say a big thank you to not just UNDP, but a big thank you to the Lisas, Belisa and Saralisa. It's been really good to have you guys talk passionately about this subject. I'm really excited about what we'll do with this program. AVPA as a network of Pan-African social investors who are looking to mobilize capital for impact and support investors in making sure they're deploying capital for maximum impact is super excited to be working through this program, recognizing that corporates are a major part of Africa's economic activities and progress. So if you think ahead, this program, the 2 webinars are building up towards registration for the program that starts in September. The details on the slide there. And the way we'll do the Managing for Impact Training program, it will be 9 weeks of virtual sessions from September 1st, 2022. It will focus on practical aspects and in-depth concepts of the IMM practice. It guides a select number of practitioners and industry leaders. And so this is where those of you who are working in corporates with sustainability desks and people looking at this kind of space, we really encourage you to apply for this program. I think once again, it will give you not just the knowledge, but I believe a competitive edge in days to come and a fast move advantage for sure. And for this first class cohort, we only have 25 slots. So it will be a matter of first come, first serve. And so we do ask you to please apply as soon as possible. So that information is available. It's also been shared. You'll get someone who's registered on this link, you'll get an email with a link to register as well as a follow-up to this webinar. And please join us for the August webinar, which the details have been put in the chat as well. And without further ado, I want to say thank you to UNDP, Joanne, David, Saralisa, and Belisa. Thank you so much for your time. Super excited about what we can do with this, and super excited about the fact that we are actually getting African corporates to operate at the highest ethical standards around sustainability. We think we'll do this continent so much good in many ways. And if you do need to get in touch with us, there are some emails. But Belisa, Saralisa, do you want to go back to the emails for people to know who to contact? There you go. So you can contact David Muller at UNDP, or you can contact Abu Okari at AVPA. And please, while you're at it, do also check out things like the Sdg Investor Maps. I'm a big fan of what those can bring to the table. And we're very happy to continue engaging with you. And until the August session, by all means, please stay in touch. And we're very happy that you could join us today. Thank you so much.
And big thank you to you, Frank, and to AVPA to make this possible, because without you, we wouldn't be here. And we look forward to our exciting journey together and with all of you. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Most appreciated.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Frank and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Participants, thanks.
Thank you.